Okay, hello everybody and welcome to a bonus urban living webinar in which we are going to be discussing the Airbnb IPO. It's a hot topic and a hot share right now, so we thought we'd better strike while the iron's hot, and I've got a great panel to discuss the issue with, which we'll introduce you to shortly. So the session will last around an hour, maybe a little less because Katherine has to shoot off. If you could keep your camera and audio off, unless you're one of our speakers, that would be much appreciated. We can have a bit of Q&A at the end, so if you have any questions for our panelists, then please submit them using the chat function in Zoom. Everybody who is registered for the session will receive a recording in an email on Monday. My name's George Sell. I'm Editor-in-Chief at International Hospitality Media, and we are an online B2B publisher for the hospitality sector and an event organizer. So before we get started, just wanted to give the conversation a little bit of context. So the Airbnb IPO has been described as a barometer for travel after the pandemic. The initial valuation of 47 billion, which obviously doubled upon trading, is a massive improvement on the 18 billion the company was valued at when it took emergency funding in April from a series of investors. Now, as most of you are probably aware, the company has come a long way from its roots. More than half of all listings are managed by hosts with at least 2 properties, and 6% of hosts control more than 100 listings. So there's a fair amount of professionalism going on there. Legal intervention can reshape Airbnb's presence in a city. After tighter rules on hosting were implemented in San Francisco in 2018, the number of available listings plummeted from more than 10,000 to just over 5,000. Some cities are viewing the pandemic as an opportunity to reduce Airbnb's presence, but the company said it's come to agreements or had conditions imposed upon its business in around 70% of its top 200 cities. RBC Capital Markets says Airbnb continues to grow faster than Booking and Expedia, and while all 3 businesses were decimated by coronavirus, the impact on Airbnb's revenues and gross bookings was less severe. Despite the company's acquisition of Hotel Tonight in 2019, the strategy Airbnb has for building its presence in the hotel market was absent from its prospectus and roadshow presentation. The company was actually courting hotels quite seriously in 2017 and 2018, but that has taken a backseat this year. And here are a few highlights from the IPO prospectus, which was sent around to investors. So there are more than 4 million Airbnb hosts in more than 220 countries. Bookings were down 72% in April at the height of the pandemic, and roughly 20% through June to September. Q4 of this year is expected to have lower bookings than Q3. The company has made losses of 700 million on revenue of about 2.5 billion in the first 9 months of this year. And the company does not intend to pay a dividend in the foreseeable future. So here's a quick video from my colleague, Paul Stevens, who's just going to speak for a minute or so on his thoughts about the IPO.
Simply, the Airbnb IPO is a watershed moment, not just for the whole short-term rental industry, but indeed for the whole travel sector. With vaccines being rolled out, investors have shown considerable faith in a company that was valued at $18 billion at the nadir of the pandemic, and confidence in travel rebounding in 2021. While we should expect to see some fluctuation, fueled by market exuberance and unprecedented investor enthusiasm, Airbnb has surged past competitors and has one of the strongest brands in travel, driven by unique presence and offering and customer loyalty. The threat of growing regulation, scrutiny, and concerns over local housing affordability may also fuel Airbnb's ambitions to diversify into more verticals, such as hotels and transportation. Significantly, the IPO establishes Airbnb's juggernaut position and paves the way for the company to shape itself as the go-to holistic travel portal. Its ambitions are unheralded, and there is no limit to where this can take them.
Okay, thanks, Paul. So today we have a great panel of speakers to discuss the IPO. And if you could all just introduce yourselves quickly, that would be great. And let's go from left to right and start with you, please, Katherine.
Hi, so my name is Katherine Doggrell. I'm the EMEA Editor-in-Chief at Questex Hospitality, the company that brings you the Berlin conference when there is a Berlin conference. And I'm also the author of Checking Out, which is about the rise in the sharing economy and the impact that it's had on the hotel sector. And it's currently available 30% off in the Bloomsbury Christmas sale. So, so after you finish with this, do pop over.
Wow, nice plug. It's just like hosting a chat show. Great stuff.
Can I call you Jonathan?
You can. Andrew, over to you.
Hi, I'm Andrew McConnell. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Rented.com. We are a technology and technology service provider to small and medium vacation rental management companies and Airbnb managers, predominantly in revenue management and pricing.
Thanks, Andrew. And finally, Sascha.
Yeah, my name is Sascha Hausmann. I'm a general partner at a venture capital fund called HOWZAT Partners. We're based in London and Luxembourg, and we are active investors in the travel space, both on, well, actually on transportation and on the hospitality side, both vacation rental as well as hotels. Great,
thanks, Sascha. So, as I mentioned earlier, the Airbnb IPO has been described as a barometer for the future of travel. Sascha, we touched on this briefly before we started the call. What do you think is the wider significance for the travel and hospitality sector of the IPO?
Well, the thing is, we discussed this just shortly, before the call. As an investor, for the last 6 months, I've been told I'm over optimistic on how the future of travel will evolve, with the pandemic. And in the portfolio, and 40% of what we do is travel and transportation. So we have about 30 companies in the portfolio right now that deal with B2B and B2C travel. And we had a real problem finding investors for some of them, simply because investors are scared. Travel is down, and it'll have a huge impact for the next year or two. And 2021 doesn't look so great. 2020 is dead. And what it actually shows when you look at the Airbnb IPO, and there's still details to follow over the next couple of days, but it doesn't seem like that institutional and private investors are so worried about travel like we would have assumed, right? So, there is confidence in the fact that that travel will come back, because, otherwise you couldn't justify what just happened yesterday, which is, over doubling of shares. So for me, that's a great sign of confidence in terms of, that our industry will remain and that our industry is still sexy to, to investors. But there's also a downside that comes with that, and that is, hopefully not to be seen over the next couple of days or weeks. And that is, should Airbnb not manage to keep its value up, and I wouldn't expect it to necessarily keep double, but would it start taking, a hit, then that could also lead into the opposite. But I'm always optimistic. So I think for the travel industry as such, and for the availability of funding to startups and participants in the travel space, I think it was a good thing.
Thanks, Sascha. Katherine, what's your take on the wider significance of the IPO?
I think the wider significance of the IPO is that something came along in the travel space that people could buy, and they were all really happy about it, because there's loads and loads of money sitting on the edge of the industry that needs to go somewhere. And at the moment, in terms of real estate and other sort of similar transactions, nothing's cheap enough yet. So this popped up. People had lots of money in their pockets, and they thought, yes, let's pile into I was going to say hotels, but clearly not. Let's pile into alternative accommodations.
So you don't think it was necessarily the attractions and strengths of Airbnb as a business, it was just good timing?
It's certainly shown its attractions and strengths over the pandemic, which has been super useful in the run up to this to really illustrate exactly what it can offer. It's been the perfect showcase, which has been great. So yeah, it was good timing. You'll bear in mind that the Airbnb IPO has been on the cards for I don't know how many years now. And it was really, I think, only the difficult time they had at the beginning, having to get the emergency funding, that's pushed them into this. But they could probably have held on for a bit. But the summer has been a great showcase. I've Airbnb'd the nuts off myself all summer long, and it's just been great. So you can see why everyone else is thinking, there may be something in this kind of remote location bit, and off they've all popped.
Yeah. Okay. And Andrew, what's your take?
I'm going to take a kind of contrarian view on this. I think looking at Airbnb as a travel play, especially if you look at cruises or airlines or all these others, is missing what people are excited about. I think it's a technology play. The stocks that are surged in 2020 have been tech companies, and Airbnb, I think more so than virtually any of the others players in the space, has always pitched themselves as a tech company first that right now happens to be in travel. And if you look at their S1, they talk about getting into long-term residential as well, which that's where the multi-trillion-dollar opportunity is created. So I think seeing them more as a tech player is where more this justification on the surging price comes from. I mean, I think, and I'm sure we'll dig into this itself, but there was a vast overreaction to the negative at the beginning of the pandemic. To think that a company that had been growing how it was, that everybody loved for as long as they did, cut in half in a week or two is insane. And Silver Lake was brilliant and said, I think we can make some money here, and came in. And so I think there was an overreaction one way, and I think now there's an overreaction the other way. And the truth, like with most things, is somewhere in the middle.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think everybody expected the shares to get a little bump when they floated yesterday, but to more than double, to value the company at around 100 billion. Why do you think it shot up so excessively? Is that to do with the climate around tech companies at the moment, or froth in the market, or relief that it finally got done? Why do you think that is, Andrew?
I think Katherine nailed it. If people have money, we're in a zero interest environment, and they're trying to find places to deploy it. And if you looked at what Snowflake did the first day, I remember some company, I forget which company it was, that IPO'd this year and jumped 70% on the first day. And Crunchbase said it was a modest success. That's crazy. Like it shouldn't jump that much. 70% should be insane. But we've gotten into this world where supply and demand for so long, very few of these companies have gone public, and especially retail investors wanted access to what they've been hearing are the hottest companies out there. And I think it's dangerous, quite honestly. Like if you looked at when when Amazon went public, or when Facebook initially went public, and all these, they didn't have this kind of valuation to have to live up to. So even if Airbnb can grow into it, it's a scary thing to have kind of this bogey to go after your first day in the public markets.
The shares are actually going to start trading again in about 20 minutes while we're on, so it'll be interesting to keep an eye on that. Sascha, you said that there is a concern that if the share price falls, it could have a negative effect for the wider sector. What do you think would be considered a success for the valuation to stay around? If as we expect, it might drop a little bit today, what do you think is an acceptable level for it to fall?
I think that's hard. That's hard to judge. Ideally, it stays above its initial floating price. So that's always a good indication, because then people will feel confident that that it was there and that there is a hype. I mean, you would have expected somewhat of a hype around Airbnb. It's probably a bit higher than people expected, but a hype was expected. It's been talked about, widely. It's it's probably the most significant travel IPO in a very long time, and so I think it was the most successful IPO in a long period of time. So you would expect that can't be kept up for a very long period of time. I mean, maybe they do, but I would doubt that. But I think if they stay around the 60 to 80 billion mark, I think people will not feel disappointed about the stock price. A little bit of hype day one I think is acceptable. As long as long term it doesn't show that it was totally overpriced, because then you have a lot of disgruntled buyers or shareholders that will not be very very enthused about their investment. Overall, to be honest with you, it's also a bit of a I think the IPO in itself for the travel industry shows a good sign for people like me, because or startups, because we can use this to showcase and say, look, I mean, lots of people have confidence in it. The question is, if in 6 months from now people are really worried about Airbnb or not. I mean, you know, I have similar experience. You know, our portfolio company Trivago, you know, we exited before it went public, but it went public at a decent price, and you know, and nowadays the price isn't as decent anymore, and you know, it has lost public interest. So the question is whether there really is a negative impact on the travel industry when it goes down. I think that's predominantly driven by how long it will take for that to happen. Right? If it happens over the next couple of days, it's probably widely reported about. If this gradually happens over the next, you know, over the next year or so, it probably will not have, you know, probably will not be noticed so much. Yeah. People have a tendency to forget quickly.
Given that Airbnb doesn't intend to pay a dividend in the foreseeable future, and they have incurred big losses this year, do you think many of the people who have invested this week are in it for the long haul, or is there going to be a lot of flipping going on the back of all the froth?
I think there is some flipping going on. I mean, the initial investors usually try to, you know, take the upside that you have on the initial offering. So I think you'll see that quite a lot of that happens. That also may have an impact on the price going forward, because if a lot of them sell shortly, then there's going to be, you know, there's going to be more on the market than people are willing to buy. In terms of not paying dividends, I think that's become the norm, right? I mean, when you look at startups, I don't think that I'd expect any of ours in the portfolio to pay a dividend. We want that money to be reinvested because we're in it for the corporate value. We're not in it for, you know, getting paid a dividend or a distribution. And I think there's one example, you know, that has done really, really, really well, and that's Amazon and Jeff Bezos. I mean, he was sniffed at for years, but not paying dividends and you know, not turning a profit. But you know, he reinvested, and when you look at the development of the share price and its public value, you know, he was shown right. So I think that, you know, nowadays it's not as sniffed upon anymore as it used to be when a company doesn't turn a profit and reinvest, as long as you can show that it's actually in reinvestment and not a, you know, stagnation of the business model itself.
Mm-hmm. Jeff Bezos is an interesting example, actually. Katherine, do you think Chesky and Co will follow his lead and stick around for a while? Are they in it for the long haul?
Well, they launched that non-profit, didn't they, that we were talking about, and they've invested a glorious total of $6 million in collectively. So, you know, they don't want to be missing out on that. My favorite Jeff Bezos fact is that he's a licensed gelder, which I think probably always comes up in board meetings. What a talent. Yes, if they're in it for the long term, it seems more than likely. If they're to bail out now, then it's just going to make the other investors nervous, isn't it? And they've shown themselves throughout this, as Andrew was saying, to be very keen to move to wherever the sun is shining on them. So they were looking at students. They did that deal with Brookfield a long time ago, didn't they, where they were building properties and they were long-term rentals. So I think when you've got something where the structure of the company isn't entirely clear what it is, you need something that's going to be the same, and that would still be the founders. So you can't, I think at this point, entirely define Airbnb. So you need some strong leadership, or at least some prominent leadership, to reassure everyone. So yeah, I'm sure they're not going to cash out next week. Maybe they will.
Well, they pivoted, didn't they? Pivoted from being a cereal company to being a travel company.
They do enjoy a good pivot. Who doesn't? So yes, maybe they'll decide their fortunes lie in students, but probably not until the end of the pandemic.
But it's an interesting point. Where do you think they will use the cash to go? Do you think it will be to acquire companies in verticals they're not in at the moment? I mean, they've obviously had to pull back from some areas, but do you think now the financial situation has changed for them, they'll be on the acquisition trail? I
think when they sober up, they're going to realise they're suddenly sitting on twice as much cash as they'd hoped. Yeah, it could happen. They talk in the prospectus about the potential for acquisitions. I'm not entirely sure what they would go for. Obviously, at this point, they could go for Marriott, which would be an intriguing move that I would enjoy personally. But I don't know. I think the whole idea that they might go into being more like an OTA, I think, is a bit of a misnomer, because they've got quite a difficult sort of issue with their brand, with this whole kind of homespun, live local, contrast against the professional rental bit and ownership. And I think if they're to deviate into other things, you put yourself into a very dangerous capitalist maneuver, where you can be seen to be, you know, oh, well, we're going to add airlines, or we're going to add taxis and this, but really we're just a homespun, live local thing. I think there's too much problems in diluting the brand. So I think now they've suddenly have the potential to do big deals. I think they might find themselves in a few issues about which direction to take. I don't think it's as obvious as it looks.
And to make one comment on that, if I may, right? We have examples in the travel space where single, or almost single product versus multi-product shows better value, and that's Booking.com versus Expedia. I mean, I remember that for years Expedia was by far the much more valuable entity, and at some point in time you would go to Focusrite, and all of a sudden it would not be Expedia or Dara being the last person to speak on stage. It would be Jeff Boyd from Booking.com. Right? So I think they should be advised to monitor carefully in terms of what they should be investing into, and and which direction they should go. And I think the flights and the hotels have shown them that it isn't so easy to just tap into other spaces and dominate them just like they did the vacation rental space. The other thing is that, to use Booking.com CEO's comment, they have a needle now, and that needle needs to move, and that needle needs to move upwards, right? So I'm pretty sure that we're going to see some acquisitions going forward, simply because they have the cash right now, and they need to show that something is happening. They need to progress.
Andrew, where do you think they're likely to spend this cash? What's your guess?
Yeah, I think it actually gets back to the initial question too, on where do the founders go from here. So I think the three founders are sincere believers in the product, in the original product, in the hosting, the belonging, the live like a local. And for them, it's a calling as much as anything. I don't see them wanting to go anywhere. They really seem to enjoy what they do. The flip side of that, right, is you have the public mutterings from Brian and others. It's all about that individual host, all about that cottage, that small, this little industry. That's not a $100 billion business, and it's probably not a $50 billion business. If you look at that one, where all the growth and all the big numbers come from are from professionally managed short-term rentals, from long-term residential, from hotels. Like, how they get to the 2 trillion number is they add in all these other things, and that creates a pretty strong tension of what Brian and the team really believes in and wants the company to be. And it seems what the finance people are saying, hey, to get to this valuation, what you need to be. And so I think that plays, one, into where they go, and two, into where they go, one, as a business, and they also go as founders, and what that tension between investors and the founding team ends up being.
And I think there's another element to consider, and that's something that they haven't had to deal with so far, and that is they're in the public eye now. Up until now, they were a privately owned company that had private equity as part of it, and that was probably as public as it would get. Now, every couple of weeks, you'll be able to read about what they've done and what they're planning to do. And if they do something drastic, they have to, issue a public note. So I think it becomes a bit more transparent in terms of where they're trying to go and what they're trying to do. And, we'll see how they manage that, because up until now they were, able to just, boom, here it is, here's something new. We'll see if that surprise effect will still be there.
Yeah. Katherine, what do you think are the biggest obstacles to Airbnb's growth? Are they from legislation? We know they're under varying amounts of pressure in different parts of the world, or is it from potential new competition?
Yes, I think the legislation bit is interesting. They will have to, there's increasing moves to have licensing and registration, and all these things are perfectly valid, and I think that they'll come in, but I think that they'll manage those. I think they're of such a size now with 6 million listings that it's not really going to be an issue. I think that the biggest problem for Airbnb is going to be Airbnb. My experience of excessive Airbnb over the summer was such that the service and the quality and the issues around the platform were huge. Whether it was due to the number of people using it all at once, but so many fake listings, so many problems with the listings that were there that weren't being managed properly. And it's got to that stage now where you have the kind of the Facebook issue where you say, well, there's just too many things there. We can't possibly control hate speech because there's just too much. It's too big. And if you're at 6 million listings and you can't control all those listings and you've got people complaining and there's no response for 48 hours, we found ourselves going to competitors like Vrbo, who are smaller but have a much longer experience in this kind of thing, and of doing it well and doing it with a consistent backbone. So I think more and more, the larger Airbnb gets, if it doesn't get a grip on the way that it acts, it's an incredibly strong brand at the moment. And the problem, if you're an incredibly strong brand and there's no definable industry underneath it, is that if that brand goes, it's not looking too pretty, is it? So I think that Airbnb's biggest issue at the moment is probably Airbnb.
Yeah, and that's going to become even more complicated during the summertime. I mean, they had to do the roadshow, and they had quiet period and what have you. So that was probably already difficult for them, right? But it just won't be as easy as it was before making changes, right? They also have, they have this tail of public now that they need to monitor and also deal with, and that will slow down, making drastic and quick changes.
Yeah, yeah. Andrew, what do you think are the biggest obstacles to growth?
I think so much of it comes back down to tensions. I mean, one is the focus that I think, Brian, you saw at the beginning of the pandemic said we lost our focus. We had a million other things that were experimenting. You had the M&A team investing in the wing, and investing in Lyric, and going and doing all these things to try to find what is that next great idea. And I think back to Sascha's point, if you really nail the one good idea, it can be more valuable, Booking versus Expedia. The flip side is the truly, truly great company of an Amazon. They didn't just nail books, they nailed everything. They took their entire cost structure and turned those into profit generating businesses, from shipping to server costs and everything. If you go to Apple, they had great PCs and that kind of stagnated. And it took the iPod and the iPhone and the iPad to kind of explode that growth. And so I think the big question will be for them, can they nail and not lose their brand and the brand credibility in that core, while finding what is the next Airbnb that can make Airbnb the $100 billion company that people today are thinking it is.
I mean, if you look at Amazon, it's been obviously gripping, but I mean, they've tried, was it 2-3 times now to get into travel, and it just hasn't worked. So it's not for everyone. It seems that the people who've been successful in travel are the people who started out in travel and then added the technology afterwards, not universally successfully, because hotels are still very much, what is that buzzing noise? Is it the internet? But it's been traditionally companies who've already been there, who've been able to be successful in it, rather than people who've come from outside and have been a technology company that have been able to make any sense of what travel is.
Yeah, and we have other examples of that. Apple and Google, right? Both of which have tried travel extensively. Apple still hasn't managed. Google is still trying to manage. And before that, it was Yahoo and others that also tried to, go into travel. Travel is a difficult animal, and even if you own the traffic like Google does, it doesn't necessarily mean people buy from you. Yeah. I had one other comment on the regulation, and that is, regulators are regulators, right? And I've never really figured out whether regulators are jealous or not, right? But instead of trying to penalize, they should probably work with people, because they're penalizing one sort of business, but on the other side, they're not helping others either. So, yes, of course, apartments are a challenge in some of the condensed cities, Berlin, Germany, for example, right? Also New York and other places, but then regulators are there to bring on business, and business is being brought on by Booking.com. So I think they shouldn't be so snobby. And then also, regulators traditionally haven't been very good in bringing businesses down. I mean, I remember in the hotel space in the US, when I ran a travel company in the US, that was 10-15 years ago. The big thing was tax on net rates, and how the cities were deprived of taxes on certain hotel rates and trading on hotel rates, and that resolved itself. So I don't think that that's going to have a big impact on it, and it doesn't seem like that investors, during the IPO, were particularly concerned about regulators putting down Airbnb.
Thanks, Sascha. Katherine, how do you think the dynamic between Airbnb and the hotel industry is likely to change?
Well, hopefully, selfishly, from a journalist point of view, I hope they carry on writing nasty little public letters to each other, because that always is good reading, and funding each other's little activist groups and all the other fun things that they get up to. It's hours of entertainment. But I think what we've seen in the last few weeks certainly was a realization that Airbnb style product has made the money over the summer, and now everyone has to have it. And we saw Accor last week launching, was it something with A, something in villas, apartments and villas, where it's brought together service departments, private brand residences, and one fine stay, which gives it 50,000, not all at once, obviously, but 50,000 possible rentable products, which is not 6 million, but it's certainly a sign that hotels are starting to realize that they do have this product down the back of the sofa, and maybe they can drag it up and maybe they can use it. It's not quite a competitor, but they have now realized this is something that they can do and potentially do well, and potentially do without it being too much extra effort, which is completely key to success in the hotel sector. So I think that they're starting to work with them. Obviously, they will continue to loathe them, much like they still loathe the OTAs, and it's been, you know, a good few years now. But a little gentle hatred goes a long way in hospitality, we find.
And on the
sorry, please, Sascha, go ahead.
On the hotel side, the hotels really hate vacation rental, right? And that's slowly starting to get better now. I mean, we tried to organize a conference this year where we were trying to bring together vacation rental and hotels, and we talked to the various associations, and you know, there is some willingness to sit in the same room at least now, right? About 2 years ago, they weren't even willing to sit in the same room. And if the hotel associations could, you know, put massive stones in the way of the vacation rental industry, they would do so. And you know, if they could be bigger, they would foster to do so. I think that will slightly go away. As hotels have noticed that vacation rental product is quite attractive. And Katherine, you said it, right? I mean, you know, I still own a hotel software company, and we've seen that a lot of our customers in that company have started, when they're refurbished, they started building apartments and hotel rooms. So they take one floor offline of hotel rooms and build apartments in it so they can host families, right? So I think that Airbnb will not necessarily master the hotel space, but I think the hotel space will make it easier for Airbnb to do business in the hotel space, simply because hotels have learned that they can't be snobby-ish about hotel rooms, that consumers don't necessarily follow pursuit anymore.
Yeah.
Oh,
sorry.
On that, I mean, it's not a monolithic answer, right? You had Hyatt tried to come in with Oasis and had their flirtation, then Accor with One Fine Stay, and Marriott with, hey, let's partner with the people who've already been doing this. Back to this point of, hey, if travel is different than technology, maybe vacation rentals are different than traditional hotels. Maybe we should partner with the people who actually know what they're doing. But then on the flip side, I spoke to the CEO of a top 3 global hotel company who said, oh yeah, no, they're not competitors. It's a totally different product. No one would want to stay in those. And this was in 2020. This wasn't back in 2015. I said, no, I'm sorry, this is not like the Easter Bunny or Santa Claus. This is not, do you believe in them or not? They're here and they're eating your lunch on this product. And if you see the S1 and all the different categories that they pile in to get to that $2 trillion number as the TAM, then you can see Airbnb fully intends to converge the space. And it's been converging for the last 10 years or more, that when someone is spending a night away from home, from the bed that they normally would stay, whether it's a hotel, a serviced apartment, a vacation rental, an Airbnb, whatever label you want to put on it, what it is, it's a night stand away from home. Whether it's a 30-night stay or a 2.3 night stay, it's a night. And to get, again, to get to that 100 billion, that's at least what whoever drafted S1 is saying, that's what we're tackling.
Yeah, it's amusing that when the hotels, and I love the hotel sector, but hotels always tend to think that if you're staying away from home, your first resort is going to be to stay in a hotel room. Whereas the reality is, if you're staying away from home, your first resort to stay with someone is going to be to stay with someone you know. If you know someone in that town, you're staying there. It's not mandatory for you to stay in a hotel. There is as yet no law telling you that you have to stay in a hotel. That may change. But something that I think about reasonably frequently at 3 o'clock in the morning, where we're all going in this, is whether hotels will suddenly reawaken an interest in timeshare. Because on Marriott's Q3, Arnie Sorensen was talking about, you know, there seems to be something in these kind of all home rental businesses, and they're going to talk to more developers about doing them in kind of ski lodges and places like that. And if you're developing something and it's not somebody's original house, then maybe you could be, you know, selling and you can see how they could work themselves right back around to thinking that timeshare is a great idea all over again. And if they can take the public with them on that, timeshare was super profitable, I seem to remember. Yeah. Lots of exciting things to be done there, lots of money to be made from the financing, lots of money to be made from all sorts of things. If we can bring people back around to timeshare, I think it could be an exciting time for everyone.
Yeah, timeshare was the entry into vacation rental at some point.
Exactly.
I remember that a company called Centera in the US, you know, was actually using the timeshare business to get people, you know, they were using vacation rental to get people into timeshare, because they said, you know, somebody's already in destination, staying at a timeshare, at a vacation rental, is perfect for them to buy timeshare. Right?
Exactly.
And Yeah, and on the hotel space side, what the hotels tend to forget is vacation rental is the older industry, right? We used to stay with people when we traveled in apartments before we started, building hotels and staying away from them. So, I think the hotel industry is doing well if they start to accept and understand that vacation rental is here to stay. And the ones that we talked to during the summertime were really surprised. They thought they have it nailed because consumers are scared. They prefer to stay in a professional hotel, and even the vacation rental industry, I think, was caught by surprise that they thought the hotels are professionally cleaned. They have sanitization, they have staff that's trained on how to disinfect certain areas. And what happened? The hotel space wasn't actually the first choice. The first choice for consumers were apartments because they prefer not to be with other people in professionally cleaned hotels. So I think, the summer and this year, 2020, has taught the hotel industry a lesson in terms of, don't be arrogant, embrace what you can fight.
Yeah, but as a former chambermaid, I found myself using Airbnb a lot because I wouldn't have trusted my own ability to stay up to the rigorous cleansing standards. And Airbnb, you can clean yourself.
Katherine, a couple of years ago, Airbnb was actively courting hoteliers, saying that its commission rates were significantly cheaper than Expedia and Booking. Do you think that's a strategy they will take up again? And are their commissions as cheap as they say when you factor everything in? I think they've recently announced a new pricing and display structure, but do you think that's something they'll take up again?
Well, there's always a new pricing and display structure, isn't there, with Airbnb? Every few weeks, it seems. I think that the problem that they had a lot with hotels is that, and certainly something that they'll face now that they're huge in public, is that they need to bring on a lot of rooms. And if you're bringing on a lot of rooms, that brings an awful lot of complexities with it. The actual structure of the platform is very difficult, isn't it, to put individual rooms on. And so you couldn't load on 1.3 million Marriott rooms, for example, which is what you need to do when you're this size. To actually make a difference. So I'll be interested to see where they go with this whole we're an alternate structure. There are quite a few independents used it and had some success with it, didn't it? But I don't think that it's worth bothering with at this point. I think they need to make a big move, and adding rooms probably isn't it.
And there are two experiences, joining on one platform. And that's the issue that Booking.com had in the early days, right? But Booking.com sold to its existing customers vacation rental. So, if Airbnb tries to sell to its existing customers hotels, the first thing they have to teach them is the hotels won't respond to those 10 millions of questions that some of the hosts, receive from potential guests. Right. Mm-hmm. So, I read a few articles, in preparation for this, just to, fresh up. And there was one host that said, I receive up to 10, 15 questions for every booking that I have on average on guests that don't turn up. So, and the hotel space isn't prepared to do that. And, it doesn't have the capacity to do so. If you go back to Catherine's 1.3 million rooms on Marriott, it's 1.3 million times 10 questions they need to answer for every booking.
I mean, part of that, though, I think, and it gets to, I think Ernest just posted in the inconsistency on the experience, is the lack of brand. So Airbnb has a brand, but then the individual experience within that for what you book is different. And so if you had a St. Regis or a Ritz or a Courtyard by Marriott or something that you uploaded at the hotel, maybe there would be fewer questions. We might be confusing some of the direction there of the reason they get so many questions is that uncertainty. I'd be curious, is that host a treehouse and it may be in the north of the US? And so there are questions on, well, how heated is it? How protected from the elements? I mean, it's very different than if you were booking a hotel. What you're expecting, what you may be wondering about is going to be very, very different.
I've just had an update from my colleague Justin to say that the share price is up 2 to 3% so far on the day. It's trading at around $148, $149.
Nice.
We've got some questions coming in, so thanks to everybody who has submitted those. The first one is from MJ Paschal at AKA, and she's asking about the acquisition of Urban Door and where it will ultimately fit into the Airbnb for Work program. Andrew, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, if again, to justify the $100 billion plus valuation, you're going to have to expand aggressively into other categories. And B2B travel historically is something you have to have a big part of if you're going to be a sizable travel player. Now, obviously 2020 is different, that leisure is kind of eating business lunch, but that's, I don't think over the next 10 years, and Airbnb is trying to be this infinite company, that you're gonna have to get into business. That acquisition happened well before the IPO, and and I'm not sure how well integrated that worked. I mean, they had that partnership years ago with Amex, corporate travel, and it's a nut they've been trying to crack. And honestly, I did one of these 2 days ago with Parker Stanbury of Oasis, and they're trying to get into the B2B space. You saw Bridge Street went into bankruptcy. It's a hard nut to crack. It's a huge nut and well worth the effort. And so I think they're going to have to figure it out. I'm not sure that Urban Door is the silver bullet that all of a sudden that unlocks all this value that no one else has been able to figure out yet.
Mm. And then on the business travel side, I think what people underestimate, and that's what the hotel space is quite used to. So managed corporate travel or managed business travel is one thing, and that's where a large company has a travel department that's dealing with with corporate travel, or the users of American Express or Carlson Wagon Lee or any of the other larger, as we call them, travel management companies, TMCs. That's one side of business travel. And that side, can easily be harvested because you talk to very large organizations and offer them your product. But then there is this, and I think that's the more interesting one. That's the unmanaged business travel side. That's consumers that on leisure go to vacation rentals. So if they have the opportunity to do that on business as well and they like it, why wouldn't they do it? Right? So I think that Airbnb today already has quite a lot of corporate travel or business travel that they're not aware of, and I think that number will increase, just like the other OTAs have as well. And then I think there is a play for Airbnb to be big in the business travel side, right? And one thing on business travel, I mean, people keep on saying business travel is dead, but those are the ones that keep on looking at companies like Amazon or Google or or such or Facebook saying that people can work from home. But then over 50% or even more of that, business travel side has to do with production and construction and other industries, and they will continue to travel. And for some of them, where the stays are more than 2 nights, vacation rental is even the better product. Mm-hmm. So I think there is a huge game to play for for vacation rental in the business travel sector.
Do you think that? Sorry, Andrew, please go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say Sascha's point on that top down, the managed corporate travel, that they're pushing it versus that bottom up where the individual is doing it. And I mean, if you think back to what Box did, that was very much how they entered the market. They went to individuals who created this push demand to their corporate and said, this is way better than anything we have internally for sharing and collaboration. And I think that direction, one, aligns much more with how Airbnb started, the grassroots, the individual, the host, and they pull from that direction probably more easily than the managed corporate travel, just because no one's been able to crack that. And I think that brings a separate point of so much of it, we're trying to look at corollaries to pre-existing models for Airbnb in the public market. And back to Bill Gurley's comment of when people were saying Uber as $1 billion business, that's crazy. Like, look at the private black car market. It's so tiny. And I said, well, no, they've totally changed the transportation market and later the food delivery market. I think it's a similar thing of Airbnb. We look at Expedia and Booking because that's what they put in as their most likely competitors. But the way Airbnb attracts guests and grows is very different. It's not performance marketing. They have this brand. They have this direct traffic that none of those others have. And so I'm not sure, especially in travel, we've seen anything like this. And whether that's a really, really good thing or, oh, that's a problem because you can't just ramp that up and make it explode and grow, I don't think we know yet.
Katherine, I'm conscious you have to go shortly, so I'm going to ask you the next question first. It's from Sean Worker, and he says, if they were to guess, how do you think the board of directors of the major 6 to 8 hotel brands are reacting in private today? Oh hell, what do we do now? Or why should we care?
Well, they tried why should we care for a while, and it didn't work. So I imagine once the hangover has subsided, they'll be thinking about what they should do now, which is do better. So that'll be something to think about. We're already looking to potential massive M&A in the hotel operator sector. And last I heard, the rumor mill was suggesting there would be one massive deal coming out of this in Europe. And will that provide them with another competitor? Who knows? But do better, offer more. We've already seen lots and lots of different brands. I can't remember how many holiday inn segments there are now. I think there's a resort now as well, isn't there? So that would be 4. They have the capacity to offer different things. Offer them. The customer is eager to have things made extraordinarily easy for them. Just really, I am the laziest person in the world, and the easier you pick me up out of my bed and carry me to my destination without waking me up, and I will give you all of my money immediately. So the more we walk towards that, whoever gets there first gets my money. So let's try and think about that, shall we?
Okay. Sascha, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that they'll be super surprised, right? They will not believe what they were seeing yesterday, and I can guarantee you they're all sitting in front of a TV or in front of the internet right now, hoping that the share price plummets. And they will wake up to a surprise that the share price didn't plummet, right? To be fair and honest, I mean, some of them, Accor and Marriott, have in the past, acknowledged the fact that they've ignored the vacation rental sector for too long and have started taking actions. But then both of them haven't really done very much. I mean, it was a pretty immature approach, just trying to show people how innovative they are and that they also have vacation rental now. But I think the hotel companies have to wake up, and wake up means 2 things. Number 1 is this, build product that can actually be sold on Airbnb, and number 2, and that's what they've done with the OTAs as well in the early days, stop being arrogant with an Airbnb and how they approach and deal with Airbnb. I think now it's time for them to to come to the table and openly discuss how relationships between them and the vacation rental OTAs can look like and how product can be sold.
Andrew, do you want to chip in on the end of that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's probably a certain level of schadenfreude with the hotels today that may have had opportunities 5-10 years ago to do something here, and they didn't believe in it and didn't think it was a real thing. I would push back a little bit on Catherine's want just the easy button and I magically get to my space. And I think that may be because you love what you do for a living. I think there are a lot of people that the process of dreaming about and planning vacations is just as important to them as the vacation itself. They hate their job and it's escapism, whether they're at work or at night. And I think that's one thing Airbnb has nailed in a way the OTAs and the hotels have not. They've made it a very transactional relationship, whereas Airbnb, you create these wish lists. We have you seen these things? And it becomes an experience itself, back to even the messaging of you get that anticipatory high before you have the stay, and you have the whole discovery process. And so I think this gets back to Airbnb is just doing something very different than I think we've seen before. So it's hard on some of the pattern recognition, especially when it comes to travel, because they come at it much more from a tech angle.
Absolutely. And I have a friend who warned her husband on her 40th birthday that if he gave her a surprise trip and she hadn't been allowed to plan this trip, then she would divorce him, because all she wanted to do was plan a trip, and that's completely fair. But for hotels, and I should have been more clear on my point, if I'm going on a business trip, I want somebody to pick me up and deliver me to that. And for the hotel sector, particularly the branded hotel sector, your Marriotts and your Accors and the rest of it, they're looking at Airbnb and thinking, please don't nick off with my high value business guests. The leisure guests, they have to have them at the moment. They had to lower themselves to the lower paid traveler during the pandemic, because that's really all that's out there. But what they want is Airbnb not to steal their business guests who use their loyalty programs. I think they can probably sit back and look at Airbnb's share price and go, well, it's not so bad, as long as they don't come after my high value business customers. I'm not too fussed at this point. Volker.
And they will. And they will if they're smart.
They tried it.
It's in the S1. I mean,
yeah. And why wouldn't they? I mean, I grew up in 4 or 5-star hotels because the hotel companies were investors in the first travel company I ran. Right. So, I was spoiled. But nowadays, I personally would stay in a nice vacation rental, that's treating me well, just like as I would stay in a 4 or 5-star hotel. So I think that transition for people that are now willing to pay money for luxury is shifting already. And I think it's a part of life where the product becomes important. Some parts of my life, a vacation rental product is important. Other parts of my life, a hotel product is important. And I think the coexistence is the important one. We shouldn't try to steal each other's customers. We should, see how we can make money together. because that customer, if he's deciding he's going with the family, it's very unlikely to stay in an expensive hotel, right? So if I partner up with a vacation rental in an optimal world, then I'll bounce that guest back and forth.
Absolutely.
I've got a question here from Matteo Bradford, who says, now that Airbnb are public, will their board and shareholders allow Brian to continue down this unprofitable path? Who'd like to pick that one up?
Can I just say, I don't really care about Brian. I've got to go. It was lovely seeing everyone. I love pontificating about Airbnb. It's been a blast. So best of the weekend to you guys.
Thanks, Katherine. Good to see you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sascha, what do you think about that one?
I think, when you look at it, I thought, and in March or April, when Brian announced that they're going to refund guests on transactions that they've done, I remember that the vacation rental industry started being really annoyed and angry about it, and Brian's board also wasn't really chuffed with the idea that they had to spend I think it was 200 million or so on refunding guests. But then when you look at it, what has he done? He's created value for the brand, because anyone that was that was part of a booking that now was able to cancel and get the money back would have said, wow, next time I'm going back to Airbnb, because in that pandemic that I would have lost my money, they took care of me. So they're really consumer friendly. So I think there are lots of parts in terms of what a CEO of a travel company that's innovative does. A traditional board or board members may not necessarily agree with, right? And just because a company is unprofitable doesn't mean it doesn't create corporate value. And I think what the board should do is they should sit back and look at, and I'm not a big fan of Airbnb, just to be on the clear side, but what I think what Brian and his co-founders have shown is that the strategy of investing into brand and investing into what they've invested into has finally paid off. I mean, yesterday, 100 billion, right? Twice the value that anyone would have expected. So I think that board should review carefully whether they let Brian, spend more money, because it seems to have, paid off in the past. Having said that, there's always a control mechanism that the board has to do in a public company anyway. That spending money will probably be a bit more difficult for him going forward, simply because he isn't in full control of it anymore.
Mm-hmm. I believe Airbnb did start making a profit before the pandemic. How long do you think before they can return to that? What would be your best guess? I mean, obviously there are a lot of variables at the moment, but what would you think?
If governments allow us, because right now the pandemic isn't about consumers not wanting to travel. We saw that in the summertime. We opened the floodgates were open, right? And consumers started traveling, and nobody really cared about Corona right, left, and center. And that's why we had the second wave. Assuming that governments let us travel in probably beginning of Q2, I think 2021 will still be challenging, but I think 2022 is potentially a better year. Right? So I'd be surprised if 2021 is really good. Yeah.
Andrew, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess three things. Hey, Matteo, great to see you. Two, they were profitable typically within a specific quarter where most of the bookings happen. So on the annualized basis, I think they had once where they got a little bit of profit, but it was mostly from some options trading that LT was doing. It wasn't from the operating business that actually turned a profit. So getting back to profitability, I think, might be a slight misnomer. And so I think that this question gets to two different things. One, will they allow Brian to do it? There's a question of, and I'm not 100% clear, who holds the power there? A lot of these companies going public, the founders still control quite a lot of the voting shares and get a lot of leeway. So it doesn't matter, one side. Two, in spinning off cash in a zero interest environment, again, if Airbnb is able to continue to grow, you don't want a ton of profit spinning off, as long as you can show that the money is being invested in growth in a positive way, because Airbnb is going to grow way faster than whatever you're going to do parking it in a treasury bill right now. Mm-hmm. And so as long as they're showing that it's not, I'm spending $1.20 to buy $1, and it's truly, look, I spent 80 cents, bought $1, but that 20 cents is going into this new project and it's growing 3x, then he's going to have license to do that all day. And I think Brian, despite kind of shutting down a lot of experiments, he's demonstrated well. He's not Adam Newman. He's not buying surf parks and stuff. Like he's doing stuff tied to the vision at least.
It's things that potentially could fit to Airbnb. Whether Airbnb makes them work or not is a different story, but at least he hasn't done anything that wouldn't naturally fit to it. I mean, whether it be tours and activities or hotels, right? One could argue flights probably not the best example, but you know, movements and directions they've shown would traditionally fit to the product they're offering.
Tara Bush has raised an interesting point about the returning of fees. So Airbnb returned fees to travelers, but left their hosts to lose despite their cancellation policy. So where does the relationship between company and host sit? Are hosts likely to leave? And which brand loyalty is more important to the host or to the guest?
To the guest, right? I mean, Airbnb is an OTA. They need to be loyal to the guest, and that's what hosts need to understand. And, you know, if the vacation rental industry want to learn a lesson and a story, look at what Booking.com and the hotels used to do, right? I mean, Booking.com used to be loved by hotels when I started in travel, right? Because they were the savior from the traditional bank robbers that, you know, would take massive amounts of commission. You go into the hotel space today, I think there's probably a court case against Booking.com in any single country on this planet, you know, ongoing at any given point in time. And the hotel associations and the hotel companies, you know, are in court with Booking.com. So, and I think, you know, as Airbnb progresses, they cannot be everybody's darling. They have to choose, you know, which darling they need to be. And if they're doing their job right, and if hosts, you know, want to continue to get traffic and bookers, they have to, you know, they have to make it right with the consumer, because they're the ones paying the bills in the end.
Yeah, yeah. Andrew, would you agree with that?
100%. Airbnb, all the others, it's always been the consumer's been the customer.
Yeah.
And despite, especially on the professional side, people wanting it to be them, because they're saying, look, I'm the repeat user. I'm the one at scale. I'm the one on your platform every single day. It doesn't matter.
No.
Guest is who they care about. That's who's the one parting with money every time they make a booking. And that's where Airbnb makes its money.
And this industry has one advantage over the hotel industry. The hotel industry could gang up against the OTAs, because you only need 5-6 hotel brands to pull off an OTA, and that OTA will have a challenge because, you know, consumers are very brand focused on the hotel OTAs. In vacation rental, let's face it, if a Sonder pulls off, as an example, off of Airbnb, does that matter? Really? I mean, there's so much product out there.
No one would notice.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So, you know, I think Airbnb, you know, will have to focus on consumers in order to bring traffic in. Traffic brings in business for a host, and then the host will swallow bullets they usually probably wouldn't want to swallow.
Yeah, yeah. Guys,
as long as those hosts do one thing, and that is diversify the distribution and don't just stick on one.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks very much, Sascha and Andrew. We're running out of time, sadly, but it's been a fascinating conversation. The share price is currently 147.50, so it's holding steady.
Super. Yeah.
So thank you, guys. So just a couple of slides to show before we finish. So we will be launching the second series of our urban living webinars in the new year, kindly sponsored by Res Harmonics. If you look in the chat, you'll be able to see the links there to all the various topics. So hopefully plenty of you can join us on those in the new year. In March, we're also starting a short series of events called the Urban Living Light series. They're hybrid events, so small in-person events with an option to join digitally. Again, the links to all those is in the chat if you're interested in those. And now we're just going to show a quick light-hearted video which includes my acting debut, and you probably won't be surprised to hear I haven't had any agents beating down my door just yet.
Check, look at this.
The numbers just keep going up. This, hi, this check.
Amazing! Let's go, let's go, let's go!
More digital.
More digital? I'm on it. I need more sign-ups.
Sign-ups? I'll get you more sign-ups.
Just Put these on socials everywhere now.
Consider it done.
I can't believe it. We've got over 500 sign-ups for next week's webinar.
Oh, hi, Mummy. Oh, okay, you're going to be late home from work. Leaves on the iPad. She loves that thing.
Thank you, Sascha. Thank you, Andrew. And thanks to Katherine for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
I wish you all a great Christmas and New Year, and hope to see plenty of you on the webinar series in 2021. Thanks very much.
Great.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.